Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I've always been drawn to water. Some of my earliest memories are of fishing with my grandfather at dawn, the mist rising off the creek as we sat in comfortable silence. He'd tell me, "Someday, you'll have your own little piece of paradise by the water." That dream stayed with me through decades of city living and office work. When I finally saved enough to buy my modest ranch house backing up to Ranch Creek, it felt like coming home. The property wasn't fancy, a simple 3-bedroom with weathered siding and a yard that needed work, but it had 200 feet of creek frontage. That water access was worth more to me than any marble countertop or luxury appliance. For the first year, I just enjoyed having the creek there. I'd sit on the sloped bank with a beer after work, watching herons stalk the shallows and listening to frogs chorus at dusk. But I always envisioned building a proper dock, somewhere to tie up a small fishing boat, cast a line, or just sit with my feet dangling over the water. I did everything by the book. Spent months researching environmental regulations, hired an engineer to design a dock that wouldn't disturb the creek bed, and filed for every permit required by the county and state water authorities. This wasn't some slapped-together weekend project. I was investing in something meant to last decades. The dock cost me just over $15,000 when all was said and done. Custom cedar planking treated with environmentally safe sealant, steel supports driven deep for stability, even solar-powered lights along the edges that cast a gentle glow across the water at night without disturbing wildlife. It was beautiful, functional, and 100% legal. My relationship with the neighboring development, an upscale community called The Estates that bordered part of my property, had always been cordial if somewhat distant. Most residents were pleasant enough, nodding hello on the rare occasions our paths crossed. But the Homeowners Association board was another story entirely. I first noticed their interest in my dock project when I spotted a woman and man standing at the property line pointing toward my construction and scribbling notes. When they realized I'd seen them, they smiled with practiced politeness. "Beautiful day," the woman said. "Quite the project you've got going." "Thanks," I replied. "Been planning it for ages." "It's rather prominent, isn't it?" the man added, squinting at the half-built structure. "Some might find it affects the natural vista." "Well, it's fully permitted," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "And it's on my property." Of course," the woman said, her smile tightening. "We just take community aesthetics very seriously in our association." I nodded politely but felt a twinge of unease. "Well, good thing I'm not in your association then," I said lightly. The look they exchanged should have warned me. I later learned they were the HOA president and her husband, and they'd recently purchased an expensive pontoon boat they kept at the community dock, a dock position so that my new structure partially blocked their previously unobstructed view. 6 weeks after completing my dock, I had to take a business trip, a week-long conference I couldn't miss. I left on a Sunday, my dock gleaming in the spring sunshine. When I returned the following Saturday, it was gone. Not damaged, not vandalized, gone. At first, I thought I was hallucinating from travel exhaustion. I stood at the edge of my property, staring at empty space where my dock had been. Splintered wood fragments floated in the shallows. Metal supports had been cut clean through, leaving just the buried portions beneath the water's surface, potential hazards for any boats. I felt physically ill. $15,000, hundreds of hours of planning, and a lifelong dream destroyed in my absence. A white envelope was taped to my front door. Inside was a typed notice on HOA letterhead. Notice of rule violation enforcement action. Unauthorized structure removal. After multiple notices of violation regarding the non-conforming water structure on your property and your failure to respond to previous communications, the association has exercised its right to remove the non-compliant dock. This action is in accordance with Section 7.3 of the Community Covenants regarding preservation of waterfront aesthetics. I'd never received any previous notices, and more importantly, I wasn't even part of their association. I was still standing there shaking with rage and shock when my neighbor from 2 doors down approached cautiously. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure if I should get involved, but this isn't right." He explained that he'd been testing his new security camera system when he captured footage of a professional demolition crew arriving at my dock 3 days earlier. They had HOA paperwork and worked methodically for hours, dismantling my dock piece by piece and hauling it away in trucks. "I saved the footage," he said, "all time-stamped. They had no right to do this." That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing my grandfather's face, feeling the weight of his disappointment that I'd somehow failed to protect what we'd both dreamed of. By morning, grief had crystallized into determination. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. I wasn't invited, of course, but meetings were held in the community clubhouse, and meeting times were posted on a public bulletin board near their entrance. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my business casual best, with a folder containing my property deed, boundary survey, dock permits, and construction receipts. When the board members filed in, their expressions shifted from confusion to dismay upon seeing me sitting calmly in the back row. The president called the meeting to order, studiously avoiding my gaze until I raised my hand during the public comment period. "Yes," she said reluctantly, "the gentleman in the back." I stood. "I'd like to discuss the illegal destruction of my dock by this association." A murmur rippled through the room. Most homeowners looked confused. Clearly, they hadn't been informed about this enforcement action. "I'm not a member of this HOA," I continued, holding up my property deed. "My land is not subject to your covenants or restrictions. I had every necessary permit for that structure, which cost over $15,000 to build." The president's face hardened. "Sir, we sent multiple violation notices. Your dock violated our community aesthetic standards and blocked protected views from our common areas." "I never received any notices," I replied. "And again, I'm not a member of your association. You have zero jurisdiction over my property. Our CC&Rs clearly state that we have authority over all visible structures affecting the community aesthetic," the vice president interjected. I kept my voice level. "Your CC&Rs only apply to properties within your association. Mine isn't one of them." The treasurer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. "Perhaps you should consider this a lesson in community standards. That dock was an eyesore that affected all our property values." Several homeowners looked uncomfortable with this statement, exchanging glances. I gathered my documents and stood. "Thank you for clarifying your position. I'll be addressing this through the appropriate legal channels." As I walked out, I heard the president dismissively say, "Now, moving on to actual association business." Little did they know I'd recorded the entire exchange. The next morning, I contacted a property attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Her eyebrows rose higher with each document I showed her. "This is, frankly, astonishing," she said, reviewing the evidence. "They not only trespassed and destroyed your property, but they've created a written paper trail admitting to it. In this state, you're entitled to treble damages for willful property destruction." I also reached out to the county permitting office, where an official was equally shocked. "We approved your dock specifically," he confirmed. "It met all environmental and structural requirements. They had absolutely no authority to remove it. This is criminal destruction of property." Over the next 2 weeks, I built my case methodically. My neighbor provided the security footage. The county assessor confirmed in writing that my property was not part of the HOA. I gathered receipts, before and after photos, and documentation of similar docks along the creek that remained untouched. The most revealing discovery came from another sympathetic resident within the association. She quietly told me that the president had been selectively enforcing rules against certain homeowners while ignoring violations by her friends. More importantly, the president had been vocal at a recent social gathering about how pleased she was that eyesore dock no longer blocked the view from her new boat. Rather than rushing to sue, I took a strategic approach. First, I filed a detailed police report for criminal destruction of property and trespassing. The responding officer was incredulous. "They did what?" he asked, reviewing my documentation. "And you're not even in their HOA." Next, I submitted formal complaints to the county authorities regarding the HOA illegal actions outside their jurisdiction. The county opened an investigation immediately. I also contacted a local journalist who had previously covered HOA overreach stories. She was eager to run a piece about Association Demolishes Non-Members' Property. The story broke on a Thursday morning. By afternoon, the HOA president was calling me. "We should discuss this situation privately," she said, her voice tight. "There may have been a misunderstanding." "I'm happy to meet with you and the board," I replied, along with my attorney. They agreed to a meeting the following day. 4 board members and their association attorney sat across from me and my lawyer at the community clubhouse. Their attorney spoke first. "While the association maintains that actions were taken in good faith, we recognize there may have been a procedural oversight. We're prepared to offer compensation of $5,000 if you'll sign this agreement." My attorney smiled thinly. "My client's documented damages exceed $15,000, not including the criminal trespassing, emotional distress, or legal fees." Additionally, we've now located 3 other non-member property owners who experienced similar enforcement actions from your association. The color drained from the president's face. We're willing to settle this matter for full replacement costs of the dock, plus $10,000 for emotional distress, plus all legal fees, my attorney continued. Otherwise, we'll proceed with both civil and criminal complaints. The HOA attorney whispered something to the board members, who looked increasingly alarmed. We'll need to consult with our insurance carrier, he finally said. Of course, my attorney replied. Although they might be interested to know that intentional criminal acts typically aren't covered under association liability policies. The meeting ended with the board members avoiding eye contact with each other. 3 days later, we received a call from their attorney. The insurance company had indeed declined coverage, citing the intentional nature of the destruction and the fact that they had acted outside their jurisdiction. The settlement offer arrived the next day. Full replacement cost for an upgraded dock, $20,000, $15,000 for emotional distress, and coverage of all my legal fees. The agreement also included a permanent injunction preventing the HOA from taking any action on my property, plus a public apology to be read at their next meeting. I accepted. 6 months later, my new dock was even better than the original, slightly larger with a covered sitting area where I could enjoy the creek in any weather. The former HOA president had resigned in disgrace, along with 3 other board members. The county had implemented new regulations requiring HOA to clearly define boundaries and prove jurisdiction before any enforcement actions. Most satisfying was the "for sale" sign that appeared in front of the former president's house. Apparently her share of the settlement costs, which the board had to pay personally due to the insurance denial, had made living in that upscale community suddenly unaffordable. Last weekend, I hosted a barbecue on my new dock for the neighbors who had supported me through the ordeal, including several from the association who were now working to reform their HOA practices. As the sun set over Ranch Creek, casting golden light across the water, I thought about my grandfather and his dream of having a place by the water. Sometimes, I told my guests, raising a glass, you have to stand up for your little piece of paradise. Everyone clinked glasses, and we watched the herons fishing in the shallows of a creek that now felt truly mine. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I am by no means an expert or pro at revenge, but I am a patient person. I disclosed this to a friend, and they directed me here. Throwaway for obvious reasons. It's a long read, but the setup and backstory are important. 7 years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own place. I had saved for 10 years, worked my ass off, and I was so happy to be able to have a place to call my own. Now, being a single person on the mortgage meant I had to make compromises. One such compromise was buying a property on a shared block, a lot cheaper. Where I'm from, this usually means it's on a strata title. For some, that's a bonus, as it means there's a communal fund for repairs. Typically, insurance is cheaper as it's collective, and other things like maintenance being taken care of. Strata titles also come with a lot of bylaws and restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm a pretty private and introverted person, so having to deal with people and have limits on how I live was a no-no. I took my time, found the perfect property, shared block but freehold title. Only thing that was, I needed to pay public liability insurance for the shared walkway on the property, split equally between owners. The real estate agent is local to my area. There's also about 3 degrees of separation between us. He has friends who are friends with my friends type of thing. Didn't know him, but knew of him, so that sort of felt good too. About 5 months after I move in, I get a knock on the door from the owner, landlord, of the property next to me to discuss insurance. Not a problem. I ask for a copy of the policy, so I have a record. It gets sent through and low, and behold, it's for strata insurance. I was incredibly confused, and after much back and forth, the property isn't a freehold title but a strata title. I called my lawyer, who conveyed the title, etc. He was dumbfounded, but over it all did the right thing and made things as right as they could. I arranged for a meeting with the real estate agent. I brought emails and printouts of the ads they had, all saying it was freehold. Emails between the real estate agent and my lawyer discussing its freehold status. Despite it being an absolute black and white, he refused to accept any fault or offer anything to make things right. I don't begrudge that. He's looking out for himself. I get that. However, I wouldn't forget it. I did enter into mediation with the real estate agent, and all I asked for was, when the time came for me to sell, they'd do it or cover the costs. I thought this was reasonable, but they flat out refused, offered me $1,000 to go away, which I refused. I had the option to pursue them legally, and was advised by the mediator to do so, but ultimately I decided against it for a few reasons, the main one being my health at the time. So I planned and plotted, and I schemed and connived as to how to get back at this son of an idiot. And I settled on this. I found his personal Facebook page, which wasn't set to private. Saw some photos of a boys on tour trip he went on a few weeks prior, so about 5-6 months after I bought the property. I also found his address through a business registration search. On the anniversary of the sale for 6 years straight, I sent them flowers with a note. Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day. She has your eyes. Love, L. They varied ever so slightly over the years, but always had on this, our special day. And some weird inference to a love child and a desire to reconnect. I also from time to time arranged for postcards and letters to be sent from another country, the one he was on tour in, always signed Love L. I learned about 3 weeks ago that this guy had recently divorced, lost his home, and is not longer working as a real estate agent. His wife had found out he cheated on her. The story I was told through said friends of friends went along the lines of, he would get weird gifts and flowers every year, same day, every year. She, his wife, finally put 2 and 2 together and realized what the date was, and he admitted to cheating on her. Now, I didn't mean for this, but it turns out a year before I bought my house, he had gone on holiday, came back with an STD, gave it to his wife, but somehow convinced her that it wasn't him. As such, our special day turned out to be right around the time he'd have been balls deep, sans condom, in someone who wasn't his wife only 1 year earlier. He's apparently lost his house, half his retirement savings, and also his business. I do feel a little bit guilty about all of it sometimes, but then I'm reminded that he's a scumbag, and that karma, like me, is a patient, spiteful, and vengeful idiot. The next one is an entitled People's Story. I've always been the computer guy. Since I was 12, I'd been taking apart and rebuilding computers, teaching myself coding, and figuring out how to make systems work better. By the time I was 18, I had certifications most professionals don't get until their 30s. It was just something that clicked for me. 2 years ago, at 26, I landed what I thought was my dream job at a mid-sized tech company. The interview process had been brutal. 6 rounds of technical questions, personality assessments, and meetings with various team members. When they offered me the senior systems engineer position, I was ecstatic. The salary was great, the benefits were solid, and I'd finally be able to work on enterprise-level systems. My first year went better than I could have hoped. I streamlined our backup processes, cutting recovery time by 70%. I implemented a new ticketing system that improved customer satisfaction scores by 23%. I even developed a custom monitoring solution that caught potential outages before they affected clients, saving the company tens of thousands in potential penalties. But despite all this, I constantly found myself being second-guessed in meetings. "Are you sure that's the right approach?" my boss would ask, even after I'd explained my reasoning with data to back it up. "Maybe we should get a second opinion," another manager would suggest, looking at my significantly older colleagues. My direct manager, let's call him M, was the worst offender. He'd been with the company for 15 years and somehow had risen to head of IT operations despite having skills that were woefully outdated. He still preferred physical servers over cloud solutions and once told me in all seriousness that this Docker thing is just a fad. During my second year, our company started having financial troubles. Client retention was down, costs were up, and rumors of restructuring filled the break room. That's when I noticed M started taking credit for my ideas in reports to the executive team. I didn't confront him at first. I figured as long as the ideas were being implemented, that was what mattered. But then came that department meeting that changed everything. Before we wrap up, I'd like to propose a solution to our ongoing server stability issues, I said, pulling up my presentation. I've developed a hybrid approach that would migrate 60% of our operations to a distributed cloud infrastructure while maintaining our most sensitive data on premises. The model shows we could cut costs by 35% while improving uptime by nearly 15%. I walked through the technical aspects, the implementation timeline, and the projected savings. The room was quiet when I finished, the good kind of quiet that happens when people are thinking. Then M cleared his throat. "That's an interesting concept," he said, his tone making it clear it was anything but. "But I think you're missing the complexity here. Clients aren't ready for that kind of shift." "Actually," I countered, "I've already spoken with 3 of our biggest clients, and they're all moving in this direction themselves. They'd welcome the compatibility." M's face reddened slightly. "When you've been in this business as long as I have, you learn that these fads come and go. Our current system is stable and understood. We're not going to risk client satisfaction on unproven technology." The meeting ended awkwardly, but I figured it was just another day of generational technology disagreements. I was wrong. That afternoon, M called me into his office. "Close the door," he said, not looking up from his monitor. I sat down across from him. "I'm making some changes to the team structure," he began. "We need to realign our resources based on client expectations and company needs." Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. I'm moving you to the internal support team, he continued. It's a lateral move that will give you exposure to different aspects of the business. Internal support, I repeated. That team handled password resets and printer jams. That doesn't seem lateral from systems architecture. He finally looked at me. Clients aren't comfortable taking direction from someone so young. It's not personal, it's business. The role comes with adjusted compensation, of course, to reflect the change in responsibilities. Adjusted how? I asked, though I already knew. A 15% reduction, in line with the position's market value. I felt my face getting hot, but kept my expression neutral. And my current projects? I'll be overseeing those personally moving forward. I took a deep breath. When would this transition happen? 2 weeks from today. I need you to document your current work and train your replacement. I nodded slowly. I understand. I'll need that in writing for my records. He seemed surprised by my calm acceptance, but nodded. HR will provide the paperwork tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, though I was, but because I was planning. This wasn't just about me. The company was struggling because of outdated thinking like M's. His approach wasn't just hurting my career, it was hurting the entire business. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly as asked. I documented everything meticulously, but I also started gathering data, lots of it. I pulled performance metrics, financial records, client satisfaction scores, and implementation timelines for every project I'd worked on. I created a detailed report showing the cost savings and efficiency improvements from my innovations. I compared our performance against industry benchmarks and showed where we were falling behind. I even created projections showing what would happen if we continued on our current path versus implementing the changes I'd proposed. The numbers told a clear story. The company was losing ground because it was clinging to outdated technologies and methodologies. During my lunch breaks, I started meeting with colleagues from other departments. Not to complain, but to understand their pain points. I discovered many shared my frustrations. Several brilliant younger employees were on the verge of quitting because their ideas were being ignored in favor of the way we've always done things. In my second week of transition, I requested a meeting with the CEO. I didn't go through M or even mention it to him. I simply sent an email directly to the CEO and S assistant saying I had critical information about the company's technical infrastructure that impacted our financial situation. To my surprise, I got a meeting scheduled for the following day. The CEO looked tired when I entered his office. The company's struggles were clearly taking a toll. "You have 15 minutes, he said, not unkindly, but clearly busy. "What's so important?" I handed him a folder. "The company is considering outsourcing the IT department because of inefficiencies. Correct?" His eyebrows shot up. "That's not public information." "No, but it's the logical conclusion based on our current performance metrics and financial situation," I replied. "However, outsourcing would be treating the symptom, not the disease." I walked him through my report showing how the innovations I'd implemented had saved the company money and improved client satisfaction. I explained how M had systematically rejected technological upgrades that would have significantly improved performance, often taking credit for my ideas while blocking their full implementation. "This is concerning," the CEO said slowly. "But what's your point in telling me this now? I understand you're being reassigned." "I'm not here to complain about that," I said. "I'm here to propose a solution." I pulled out another document, a restructuring plan I'd been working on during sleepless nights. It outlined the creation of a new innovation team that would focus on modernizing our infrastructure and processes. The team would report directly to the executive level, bypassing the traditional department structure. This would save approximately $2.3 million annually while improving our service metrics by an estimated 30%, I explained. And it would require minimal staffing changes, just reallocating existing talent more effectively. The CEO studied me. "This is very thorough, but frankly, you're quite young to be proposing organizational changes of this magnitude." I nodded. "I understand your skepticism. That's why I'm proposing a 3-month trial period with clear, measurable KPIs. If we don't meet them, you can dissolve the team and proceed with the outsourcing plan." He leaned back in his chair. "I'll need to think about this." "Of course," I said, standing. "Thank you for your time." As I reached the door, he called after me. "One question. Does M know you're being moved to internal support?" "He's the one who made the decision," I replied. The CEO's expression was unreadable. "Interesting. I'll be in touch." The next week was intense. M seemed to sense something was happening because he started assigning me impossible deadlines for my transition documentation. I worked nights and weekends to complete everything while still refining my innovation team proposal. I also started quiet conversations with several colleagues I respected, both young and experienced, about my vision for improving our systems. Many were enthusiastic, offering their own insights and improvements. We created a prototype of a new system architecture that would allow for gradual migration to more modern solutions without disrupting current operations. We tested it in a sandbox environment, and the results were even better than I'd projected. Meanwhile, I discovered something troubling while documenting my current systems. M had been deliberately maintaining inefficient processes that required larger team sizes to manage. The more staff he had reporting to him, the more important he appeared in the organization. It was mind-boggling. He was literally choosing to do things the hard way to protect his empire. I documented this as well, carefully and factually, without accusation. 3 days before my reassignment was to take effect, the CEO at S assistant contacted me. There would be a special board meeting the following day, and I was expected to attend and present my proposal. When I arrived at the boardroom, M was already there, looking confused about my presence. The CEO nodded at me as I took a seat, and several other executives filed in. "Thank you all for coming," the CEO began. "We're here to discuss the future of our technical operations. As you know, we've been considering outsourcing as a cost-saving measure. However, an alternative proposal has come to my attention." He nodded to me. "Please proceed." I connected my laptop to the projector and launched into my presentation. I explained the innovation team concept, the prototype results, and the projected savings. I was careful to keep it factual and not point fingers at specific individuals for our current issues. When I finished, there was a long silence. M finally spoke up, his voice tight. "This is absurd. We can't restructure our entire technical approach based on the ideas of someone with barely 2 years of experience. There are complexities here that—" "What complexities specifically?" one board member interrupted. "The data seems quite clear." M stumbled through a response about client expectations and traditional methodologies, but it felt hollow against the hard numbers I'd presented. The questioning continued for nearly an hour. The board asked about implementation timelines, training requirements, and potential risks. I answered each question directly, acknowledging challenges while offering solutions. Finally, the CEO spoke. "I've reviewed this proposal extensively over the past week and had our CFO independently verify the projections. The board will now vote on implementing the innovation team on a 3-month trial basis. The vote was unanimous in favor." The CEO continued. "Effective immediately, we will establish the innovation team as a new department reporting directly to me. Based on the architectural expertise demonstrated both in this proposal and previous contributions to the company, I am appointing our young colleague here as Director of Innovation." I struggled to keep my expression professional as I realized what had just happened. Director was 2 levels above M's position. "The existing IT operations department will be restructured under the innovation team's oversight to ensure alignment with our new technical direction," the CEO added. M's face went from red to pale. I've been with this company for 15 years. I won't report to someone half my age." The room went silent. The CEO's voice was calm but firm. "That is your choice to make. We can discuss a severance package if you prefer. However, I should note that your role in creating our current inefficiencies has been thoroughly documented." M looked at me with undisguised hatred before storming out of the room. The next few months were a whirlwind. We implemented the new system architecture, retrained team members, and established new workflows. It wasn't always smooth, change never is. But the results spoke for themselves. By the end of the 3-month trial, we had exceeded every KPI we'd set. M ultimately decided to stay, though it clearly pained him. I made a point of not being vindictive. I assigned him to areas where his experience was truly valuable and made sure he got credit for his contributions. It was uncomfortable at first, but gradually, a grudging professional relationship formed. 6 months after the restructuring, our company had turned its finances around. Client satisfaction was up, costs were down, and we were even starting to win new business based on our innovative technical approach. In a surprising move, the CEO announced a new merit-based promotion system to replace the traditional seniority-based approach. I received a significant bonus for my contributions, and several of my team members were recognized as well. One evening, I was working late when M stopped by my office, something that had never happened before. "Got a minute?" he asked, hovering in the doorway. "Of course," I said, gesturing to a chair. He sat awkwardly, looking around at the office that had once been just 2 doors down from his own. "I wanted to say that the new client portal your team built is impressive. The feedback has been excellent." "Thanks," I replied. Your input on the security protocols was crucial. You caught several issues we might have missed. He nodded, then fell silent for a moment. I was wrong about you, he finally said. I saw your age and made assumptions. Sometimes it takes young eyes to see old problems in a new way. I was stunned. I appreciate that. Your experience is still invaluable to the team. After he left, I sat back in my chair, processing what had just happened. I hadn't set out to humiliate M or take his job. I'd simply wanted to make things better. For myself, for the company, and ultimately for everyone who worked there. A week later, I was called to the CEO's office again. I have a confession to make, he said after I sat down. When you first came to me with your proposal, I was already looking toward retirement. Part of the restructuring was to identify who might be capable of leading the company forward. He smiled. You've exceeded my expectations. I'd like to start grooming you for an executive role. Are you interested? I thought about how far I'd come from that meeting where M had tried to demote me just for being young. If he hadn't done that, would I have been pushed to document everything and create the innovation team proposal? Would I be sitting here now being offered a path to executive leadership? Sometimes the worst professional moments create the best opportunities. I just had to be prepared enough to recognize them and brave enough to act. Yes, I told the CEO, I'm definitely interested. Looking back, I never set out to become M's manager. I just wanted to be judged on my abilities rather than my age. But in fighting for that principle, I ended up changing the company for the better and my career trajectory forever. The next one is a malicious compliances story. My friend Idris recently shared this wild story from his first job, and I'm still shook. Idris was 17 when he started at this grimy call center. Back home, he's got a whole crew of geese in his yard. He's obsessed with them, treats them like pets, and has a favorite named Blinchik, Russian for pancake. He brought a little wallet-sized photo of Blinchik to work, just to keep his spirits up in that depressing dump. But his boss, Dave, saw it and flipped out. Dave had this hardcore rule. No personal items on your desk. It's about professionalism. Meanwhile, his own desk was a trash heap. Old mugs, random figurines, even some rusty fish statue. Idris says Dave had these weird tics. He'd go from passive-aggressive whispers to fake nice vibes in a heartbeat. Total oddball. Anyway, Dave clocked the goose photo and went nuclear. He made Idris rip it to shreds in front of everyone, muttering about rule breaking. Idris, just a 17-year-old kid, froze. He had no clue how to stand up for himself back then and just did it. He says he almost cried but held it together so he wouldn't look weak in front of the team. Blinchik's photo was toast and Dave smirked like he'd just won something. Idris wasn't letting it slide. Dave want me to obey, I'll maliciously comply with him. Next day, he rolled in with nothing. No pen, no notepad, no headset. When Dave asked what the deal was, Idris hit him with, "You said no personal items. I'm waiting for the company to hook me up." Dave lost it, but Idris doubled down. "It's your rule." The team jumped in. Half of them stopped bringing their stuff too, and the whole operation tanked. Customers were raging on the phones, calls were dropping, and Dave was scrambling to make everyone work normal. Eventually, he caved and mumbled, "Fine, bring what you need, just keep it low-key." Idris came back with a fresh Blinchik photo and slapped it on his desk. Dave didn't say squat. But it gets crazier. A couple weeks later, Dave tried to fire Idris for insubordination. Idris, now sharper, had recorded the whole no personal items freakout on his phone, legal where we're at, and sent it to HR with a rundown of Dave's hypocrisy. HR didn't axe Dave, but they gave him a slap on the wrist, and he chilled out. Then the real bomb hit. Turns out Dave had been skimming cash from the petty cash box for years. Small grabs, but steady. Idris says he cooked up the rule obsession to keep everyone stressed and off his trail. He'd snag money from the drawer, supposedly for coffee, paper, office junk, and mark it as office needs. It added up to a hefty chunk, though no one's dropped an exact number. His weird mix of passive-aggressive jabs and over-the-top strictness kept newbies like Idris too spooked to dig deeper. That photo meltdown? Idris figures Dave was just flexing to throw everyone off his scent. Dave got busted when a senior coworker noticed the office expenses weren't lining up. They canned him and later even filed charges. Idris says he's still stoked about how he accidentally took down a crook by playing Dave's own dumb game. Blinchik's still chilling in his yard with the rest of the geese, honking at anyone who steps too close. So, Reddit, what's the call? Is Idris the king of payback? The next one is an entitled parent's story. So, there's a little bit of context needed for this first. I'm 24, and still live at home with my mum. I got with my first girlfriend almost a year ago now, and my mum is definitely scared about the idea of moving out. She doesn't have a job, she was made redundant a few years ago and claims sick pay benefits for her back. She's just turned 60, so she claims she's just ready to retire and doesn't want another job, but complains about being in the house all the time with nothing to do. She has been taking up walking clubs recently, though. Mum's mental health isn't great. We lost my sister last year, who was only 36, and it hit Mum really hard. The situation was worse than just losing my sister, but it's far too long and complicated to explain. She has no motivation to do anything, and my twin brother moved out years ago, so if I leave home, she'll have nothing left since my family all live a couple hours away. Even now, she gets annoyed when I go to visit my girlfriend, huffing and puffing and asking what days of the week I'll be home for dinner for. It makes me feel like a child, despite the fact that I've said many times that I'm happy just making my own food. She talks about getting a mortgage together, and then when she's gone, me and my girlfriend could have the house, but then throws comments in like, well, actually, you might not be with her then. First loves never usually last. I'm pretty sure my mum just wants me to stay single forever and stay at home forever. She just seems to hate the idea of me having independence from her, so ends up taking it out on my girlfriend, despite the fact that she's never done anything to Mum, and when Mum sees her, she's always so nice to her, but then makes snarky comments when it's just me. She doesn't do this to my brother's girlfriend. I understand that relationships sometimes don't last, but you take that risk when you love someone you know. At least it will be the start of my independence from my mum. I work a part-time job but often work close to full-time hours, so me and my girlfriend could potentially afford a flat together. I help with the bills at home, but our landlady recently doubled our rent. Our rent hadn't changed in 16 years. So I'm paying even more than before, and I'm hardly home since I'm at my girlfriend's a lot of the time, so I'm spending more money on food, etc. I see no reason to stay at home anymore since I'm not saving any money and it's only making me miserable. Mum talks about moving out of this place like I'm gonna go with her, even though she knows I don't want to. I feel trapped because I don't know how my mum is going to financially support herself if I'm not around. I'd be essentially making my mum homeless by moving out. Does anyone have any advice? I genuinely feel trapped, and it annoys me that my brother was lucky enough to meet his girlfriend years ago, so he didn't have to deal with any of this, and no one else I know feels financially responsible for their own mother. I don't want to be either, but I feel like I'm doomed to be, since if I just move out, everyone's gonna think I'm an a-hole. What can I do? Edit. Thanks everyone for the advice. I'm gonna have to have some tough conversations soon. I need to prioritize myself, even if my family will probably end up thinking I'm a terrible person for doing so. My mum will call me selfish. It's her favorite word. We had an argument literally tonight about how I've become more selfish for prioritizing my girlfriend over her. Pretty ironic, that isn't it? But I've got to do it for the sake of my own mental health and future. For everyone asking if there's anywhere else she could go or if she could afford to live by herself, not really. Her benefits aren't enough to cover the rent, bills, food, etc. alone. There's not really anywhere else she could go other than potentially my uncle's place. He's about an hour away from us, which is why I'm so torn, but it's killing me to stay at home, so I have to do something. There was a time we got along, but after my sister's passing and me getting a girlfriend, it's become too much to balance everything, and I've got a taste of independence now, and it's bliss. I want that. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.